Hey there, and welcome to the Transparently Jordan podcast, where I'll be talking with a new guest each week, and we'll be covering topics in health, fitness, lifestyle, and so much more. So stick around and let's get into today's episode.
This is Radiant Voices Media.
What is going on, everybody, and welcome to another episode. In today's episode, I am going to be chatting through some strategies and some tips on overcoming burnout and essentially recovery and strategies for prevention of burnout, as well as how to recover and overcome burnout. My credentials, because everybody always wants your credentials. I, of course, am a physiotherapist. I have been a personal trainer in the past, a strength and conditioning coach, a kinesiologist. I have been in the health and fitness space for nearly 10 years now. I have completed 12 marathons myself. Just last year, I ran 7 marathons in 7 back to back days. So I have accomplished some things. I am currently training for an Ironman. I train probably full time. I work full time. I do this podcast. I have a lot on my plate. And I get asked often, all the time, how I do it all and how I don't burn out. And there are times that I do burn out. So, with all of that being said, I just thought I'd share some tips and tricks that basically I do personally. And whether you want to try them, hopefully it helps somebody. Nothing that I discuss today is going to be brand new. I think everybody does the things that I do, and people that are in my position that have things on their plate have already adopted things that I already do. It's just good to kind of get some good real life examples, I think, sometimes. So that's what I am going to be doing, and I'm going to be sharing basically my journey and my experience. So, I think burnout is such a common thing, whether it is burnout in work, whether it is burnout at home, whether it is burnout with your training. I think we all these days burn out quite extensively and quite quickly. It is very common for people to say yes to more and more, and I think it's very weird because in this day and age, the hustle and doing more is everybody wants to do that. Everybody wants to say yes. Everybody wants to do X, Y, and Z. And, I think doing more is not always better. I think in this society and in this culture that we have these days, it's almost looked up to when you are doing so much, when you have so much on your plate. Um, when you have your full time job and then a side hustle and then you're doing this and that. I think that's absolutely dumb, to be honest. I think having so much on your plate is, of course, just going to lead to burnout. And I think we often forget taking time to spend on ourselves, and it's not really selfish to look after ourselves. So, I think one thing that I've adopted, especially over the last year or two, with me training essentially full time before and after, like I wake up at 4 a.m. so that I could get to the gym at 4:30. I do about an hour, hour and a half in the gym or a run or one part of my workout in the morning. I then go for my 8-hour shift at work. I'm a physiotherapist, so of course, healthcare, it is a very demanding job. And then I come home from work. I train again for a couple of hours. I recover, go to bed, and do it all over again. That's basically my day. On top of that, I am editing this podcast. I have the journal coming out. I have all of these other projects that I am doing on the weekends, on my evenings, etc., etc. So, I understand having a lot on your plate. And I think you kind of have to go back to and find your reason why. a lot of the times we always say yes to all of these projects. We put so much on ourselves and we have this desire to say yes because we want to be seen as a hardworking person. But again, if you don't go back to your why and why you're saying yes to these projects, why you are starting these side hustles, there's really no point. What's the point of burning out? What's the point of saying yes and having 5 different projects going on at the same time, only getting 6 hours of sleep at night or 5 hours of sleep at night if you don't have your why? So I think the first step is really finding your why. Over the last year or 2, I have really sat down and tried to find my why. What do I want to get out of the podcast? What do I want to get out of the journal? What do I want to get out of finishing an Ironman? And what do I want to get with my career as a physio? And when I've sat down and when I have found those whys, I think things became a lot easier, and it became a lot easier for me to wake up at 4 a.m., for me to go to bed at 9 p.m., for me to focus on these goals because again, I know my why. And I feel like because of that alone, I do not get tired as much. I do not feel like I'm grinding because I'm kind of enjoying the process. I can see the end goal. I can see the 3 month goal, the 6 month goal, and it's just a lot more fun if you can kind of know what I mean. So I think that's the first thing is finding your why. The second thing is not forgetting to take the time for yourself. I think it is very common for us to not focus on ourselves if you are somebody whom is a very I guess, eager person. If you have a lot of goals in life and you want, a lot of successes and you have all of these things that you dream of, it's very easy to forget about yourself and forget to take a step back. At the end of the day, if you crash and burn, then your goals are going to crash and burn as well. So take the time for yourself. Find something that you enjoy that is not something that you are already working so hard on. I love working on this podcast. I love doing my journal. I love running, etc., etc. But I I also have things that are just for me that I can do that are not involved in triathlon, that are not involved in marathon training, that are not involved in editing a podcast. I have things for me that I can do, even if it's just 30 minutes or 60 minutes a day to de-wind and to kind of breathe a little bit. I think it makes such a difference. So don't think that it's selfish to focus on you. If you are also like me that has a very, very demanding job, I think it's very common for people not to understand in this way because I know every job is demanding, but if you are a healthcare worker, if you are somebody that is constantly, as a physiotherapist, from the moment that I get into clinic, I see clients and patients back to back to back until the end of the day. We are extremely busy in the clinic that I work at. There is basically pretty much no downtime except for lunch. And even at lunch, we sit in a group, we talk at lunch as well. So you are, and I am constantly talking to people, people are constantly deloading their feelings and their pain onto me. And it is very draining. So when I get home, it is very important to have those things that are just for you so that you can take 30 minutes, so that you can take 60 minutes just to de-wind and relax, chill, and then, focus on other things. So that's what I normally do is I get home from work, I normally take that 60 minutes and I de-wind, and it then just allows my head to kind of reset in a sense so that I can go and I can focus on. I usually go for a cycle or a bike ride, or finish up a podcast or do this and that. So I think finding that thing for you, and if you are listening to this and you don't exactly have a job like that, maybe you work a desk job, you don't get a lot of socialization, but your partner does. I think it's also important, from someone who's been in a relationship like that, where a few of my exes have worked in, I don't want to say less of a demanding job because what they did was demanding, but they essentially worked by themselves. They didn't really get that social interaction. So, when we both got home at night, they were charged up. I was the opposite. And I think it's important to just kind of realize those differences, and to, I appreciate this from my exes. They kind of gave me that hour or two just to kind of deload. We set our highs when we got home, um, chit chat here and there, but I basically needed time to just not talk, basically, because I talked all day. I had people talk about, again, their pain all day, and their dramas in life, and this and that, and it's quite depressing sometimes when you hear these people's stories, and you just get people deload all of this onto you. It's very depressing sometimes. So I think realizing those differences is very important. This is not a relationship episode, so I'm going to move on to the next thing. I think it's also important when it comes to burnout, is recovery. So if you feel like you are burning out from sport, again, being somebody, I grew up playing so much ice hockey. I played lacrosse for a little bit. I did athletics. Now I would say I'm an amateur runner, but again, I think 12 marathons is pretty impressive. Training for an Ironman, I hope one day to complete that. And I think when you are doing so much physical exertion, it is exhausting on your body. And a way to, I guess, prevent burnout is really focusing on what you can do to recover. If you can take a look at your budget, I highly recommend checking in and seeing how often you can fit in a massage, how often you can fit in um, a physio appointment, how often you can fit in a sauna, infrared sauna, or whatever you normatech, whatever works for you, whatever floats your boat. See how often you can fit it in. If it's every 6 weeks, if it's every 4 weeks, if it's even every 8 weeks, it makes such a huge difference. Every 2 weeks, I go for my massage. I sprinkle in infrared sauna here and there. I, do my foam rolling. I do my stretching. All of that really, really prevents, I think, injury, and it prevents that burnout on your body. So don't forget to ask for help. Don't forget about those things. I think we often remember that those things are important, but again, it doesn't need to be. I know in this day and age things are very hard, but again, take a look at your budget, and if you have some wiggle room, see when you can fit it in. If you can't, go to Kmart, go wherever you can. Kmart is usually a good option. Get yourself a foam roller. They're usually $5, $6. You don't need a fancy one. You don't need a firm or light or any. Get yourself just a normal foam roller and spend 5, 10 minutes every night and use the foam roller. Yes, there is little research and little, I guess, evidence of the improvements that foam rolling can make, but there is growing research out there that does, I guess, back up the effects of foam rolling. I personally think that if you are not getting those massages, those deep tissue, then foam rolling should be a minimum just to compensate for that. I have, as a physio, I have had success stories of clients that I've recommended this to. You know, they can't essentially afford coming back to physio, or they couldn't afford going to a routine massage, and that's totally fine. So what I suggested is every day, because it is less effective than those parameters, every day spend 5-10 minutes, go through the body, start from the calves, start from the bottom of the legs, and just work your way up and spend 30-60 seconds on each area of the body and just foam roll and roll out your muscles. Go to YouTube. If you don't know where to use the foam roller, etc., etc., maybe spend that time with your physio to go over it, or go on YouTube and you can find some great stretches, some great areas to release with the foam roller. So don't forget about your recovery. I know it is very, very, um, it's nothing fancy, but we often forget about these easy things. And if you are sitting down in the evening watching TV for 30-60 minutes, if that's your deload time, it doesn't hurt to get a foam roller and spends 5 of those 60 minutes to just foam roll while you're watching TV. I think that's all I want to keep this episode at today. Again, short and sweet. So, those are just a few tips that I do, I think, to really focus on limiting my burnout. Again, I even go through burnout sometimes doing some of these things, but I think I because I am implementing those things and the things that I've just mentioned, I think when I do burn out, I bounce back quite quickly. I usually just need a day to do nothing, and then by the following day, I am completely fine and good to go because I've implemented all of these things so that burnout doesn't last extensively like I think sometimes it can. Thank you all for listening to today's episode. I will talk to you all in the next one.